I met her on a Tuesday afternoon, when the rain wasn't heavy, but soft enough to make silence feel alive. They say love has a sound. Some think it's laughter. Others say it's a heartbeat. For me, it was the sound of her umbrella brushing against mine as we stood at the same crossing, waiting for the red light to blink into green. Her hair was slightly wet, not enough to ruin the shape of it, just enough to look like the rain liked her too. She smiled first. I didn't know then that the person standing beside me would be the woman I'd share 5 winters with, and a lifetime of memory. Her name was Raina, and she said it like a soft breeze, like she didn't want to disturb the quiet between us. We met again by accident, then again by fate, and then we stopped calling it coincidence. The first few weeks. Hi everyone, welcome to Echo Tales. Weeks were filled with long walks and warm drinks. We spoke about music, about books we never finished, about cities we never visited. I remember thinking, even if I forget everything else, I hope I remember the sound of her laughter in this moment. She didn't laugh loud. It was quiet, almost like she was afraid of joy escaping too quickly. She painted, mostly in blue. I never asked why, but her canvases were always the color of ocean sadness. When I asked her if she was happy, she said, "I like to be still. That's enough." I was loud in my own way, not with noise, but with plans. I wanted things to grow, to move forward. She wanted to pause time and live in a moment. That should have told me something. But when you're in love, you don't read signs, you just hold their hand and walk. We got married the following spring, not because we needed to, but because it felt like something beautiful should last longer than just a memory. I remember her bouquet was made of white lilies. She said roses were too loud. That was Raina, always choosing silence over spectacle. Everyone said we looked like a poem together, and maybe we were, soft in the beginning, deep in the middle, and open to interpretation at the end. Our first home was small, with windows that caught the golden hours just right. We didn't need much. Just the sound of each other breathing at night was enough. She used to play piano in the evening. Not full songs, just fragments, as if her heart could only tell a little bit of truth at a time. I'd sit beside her, not speaking, just listening. She liked that, being seen without being asked. If I could go back to one moment, just one, it wouldn't be our wedding or our first kiss. It would be that Tuesday afternoon at the crossing, when 2 umbrellas touched and something unnamed began, something that still echoes in my quietest nights. Because sometimes love doesn't begin with fireworks. Sometimes it begins in silence. And if you listen closely, you'll hear it. We never promised each other forever, but we promised the mornings. And for a while, that was enough. Our home was small, not just in size, but in its needs. We didn't chase after the world. Instead, we built one that only needed 2 coffee mugs, a worn-out couch, and the scent of rain on curtains. Raina said the world was too loud anyway. "Let's make our space a whisper," she once told me, her voice softer than the lamplight that curled around her fingers. She always woke up before me. I'd open my eyes to the sound of the kettle and the soft brushing of her toothbrush, humming notes from a song that didn't exist. Our mornings were slow, like honey on the edge of a spoon. She'd pour coffee like it was an offering, and I'd sit across from her, watching the steam rise between us like a fragile silence. There were no grand gestures, no daily declarations, just the rhythm of ordinary love, folded laundry, shared playlists, laughter in the middle of grocery aisles, and hands brushing in hallways. We danced sometimes, not real dances, just slow sways to songs only we could hear. I once asked her what she was thinking during those quiet moments, and she replied, "I'm trying to memorize your breathing." Her paintings changed. The blue remained, but shades of gold started to appear. I like to think I had something to do with that maybe her joy had begun to interrupt her sadness. But Raina never painted for the world. She painted for the parts of herself she didn't know how to speak about. We rarely fought, not because we were perfect, but because we were careful, like two people holding a fragile glass between them. If we raised our voices too loud, it might break. So instead, we left little notes on the fridge. "I'm sorry. I'll listen better next time. I made your favorite tea." And when we loved, we did it quietly. She'd rest her head on my chest, and I'd wrap my arms around her like a lighthouse protecting the shore. I remember the first time she cried beside me, not out of sadness, but because she finally felt safe. She said she hadn't cried in years. That night, I didn't say a word. I just held her, like a prayer I did, and when we loved, we did it quietly. She'd rest her head on my chest, and I'd wrap my arms around her, like a lighthouse protecting the shore. I remember the first time she cried beside me, not out of sadness, but because she finally felt safe. She said she hadn't cried in years. That night, I didn't say a word. I just held her like a prayer I didn't want to end. We made a playlist called Us. It wasn't filled with romantic songs, just sounds that reminded us of each other. A violin in the rain, wind chimes in winter, a voice that cracked on a single word. Whenever things felt distant, we played that list and sat on the floor together, touching knees, hearts trying to find their rhythm again. But even in those golden days, something lingered, a stillness that wasn't peace, like the space between waves, calm, yes, but only because something larger was waiting underneath. We never talked about the future much. Raina didn't like to plan. She said too many people try to trap the wind. "Let's just be," she'd say. And I wanted to, more than anything. But sometimes love isn't just about being, it's about building. And we hadn't decided yet if we were builders or dreamers. Still, in those early years, it felt like we could survive anything. We were soft, and soft things can break, but they can also bend. And we bent for each other in all the ways that mattered. Looking back, those were the best days, not because they were perfect, but because they were ours, untouched, unbothered, honest. We didn't know it then, but those quiet promises would one day be the things we'd try hardest to hold on to, even as they slipped through our fingers like sand. Sometimes the silence between us wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt like an empty seat at a dinner table, always there, always waiting. It didn't happen all at once. There was no sharp turn, no breaking sound, no final argument, just a slow shift, like the seasons changing while you're too busy to notice the leaves on the ground. We still had our morning coffee, still walked to the market on Sundays, but something had changed. Quietly, like furniture slightly rearranged while we slept. I started coming home later, not because I didn't want to see her, but because I didn't know what to say anymore. And Raina, she stopped painting as often. Her brushes stayed clean too long, her canvas untouched, her blue and gold frozen in time. She said she was tired, but not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. We both pretended for a while. We laughed at the same shows, took pictures when the light was good, posted them with the right captions. "Love is in the little things," one of them said. But the little things were disappearing. She'd stand by the window more often, watching nothing in particular. I'd ask what she was thinking, and she'd say, "Just clouds." I knew that wasn't true, but I didn't push. Maybe I should have. Maybe she wanted me to. Or maybe she was tired of explaining the weather in her mind. Our dinners grew quieter, forks clinking, but no conversation. I asked how her day was, and she said fine, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wanted to tell her I missed us, but the words got stuck in my throat like a whisper, afraid of the dark. One night, I found one of her old paintings turned to the wall. It was one of her favorites, the one with the golden thread running through the ocean. I asked her why, and she said, "It doesn't feel like me anymore." I didn't know what to say, because I wasn't sure if she meant the painting or the love. The cracks didn't look like fights, they looked like unanswered messages, missed glances, holding hands out of habit instead of hunger. Her head stopped resting on my chest. I started sleeping on the edge of the bed. We stopped dancing. I remember one evening. It was raining, the same kind of rain from when we met. I looked at her across the room, and it felt like looking at someone I used to know. She was still Raina, still quiet, still soft. But her silence now was heavier, filled with things unsaid. And me, I had become a noise she no longer reached for. I don't know when the first real tear fell. Maybe it wasn't hers. Maybe it was mine. Maybe it wasn't even a tear. Just that ache in your chest when you realize someone is slipping away and you're still holding their hand, but it feels like air. We weren't angry. We weren't cruel. That's the saddest part. There was no villain in our story, just two people who forgot how to speak the language of each other's soul. I still told her good night every evening. She still said, "Sleep well." But it felt like an echo in an empty church. Sacred, yes, but lonely. We didn't stop loving each other. We just didn't know how to keep doing it in the same way. And sometimes that's how love ends. Not in fire, not in storms, but in the softest, quietest forgetting. There is a loneliness that lives inside togetherness. You can sleep next to someone and still feel like you're dreaming alone. By the fourth year, our apartment had grown colder, not in temperature, but in presence. There were still 2 toothbrushes, still 2 coffee mugs, but our lives ran in parallel now. Close, but never touching. We no longer argued about little things, not because we'd found peace, but because we had nothing left to defend. The fire that once burned quietly between us had become ash, soft, grey, and unmoving. She started sleeping on the couch some nights. At first, it was occasional. A migraine, a late painting session, a restless evening. But slowly, it became a pattern, a rhythm. I would wake up and find the other side of the bed untouched, cold, with the sheet still perfectly folded. I stopped asking why. I think I was afraid of the answer. We still said, "Good morning," but it was mechanical. A phrase passed between us like mail, delivered to the wrong address, received but unread. Her laughter disappeared first, then her touch, then her gaze. She'd sit on the floor, legs crossed, staring at her hands like they held stories she no longer wanted to tell. The blue in her paintings darkened. The gold faded. She said it was a new phase. I didn't ask what kind. I spent more time at work. She spent more time alone. We circled around each other like 2 moons, orbiting a planet that no longer existed. Sometimes I'd walk into a room and forget what I came for. I think I was searching for her, not the version sitting quietly by the window, but the one who once rested her head on my shoulder just to listen to my heartbeat. One night, I woke up around 3 a.m. and walked into the living room. She was there, asleep on the couch, curled into herself like a question mark. A single lamp lit the corner, and a book lay open on her lap. She looked peaceful, but so far away. I stood there for a few minutes, unsure if I should wake her, hold her, or simply walk away. I chose the last one, and I hated myself for it. We began speaking less, not out of anger, but because the words between us had grown too heavy. Every sentence felt like digging through years of unsaid things. Every smile felt borrowed. Every silence felt like a scream we couldn't bear to hear. I tried once to bridge the space between us. I asked her quietly if she still loved me. She looked at me like she wanted to cry, but didn't know how. "I don't know," she said, and it broke something in me that had already been cracking. We stopped kissing. We stopped sharing blankets. The playlist we made together gathered dust. I stopped playing it. I think we were afraid of the memories attached to those sounds. There was one evening I remember clearly. It was raining again. Always the rain. We sat at opposite ends of the same couch, watching a movie neither of us cared about. At one point, I turned to her and whispered, "Do you want to hold my hand?" She looked at me with the saddest smile I'd ever seen and replied, "I want to, but I don't remember how." We were two people trying to keep something alive that no longer had a heartbeat. Still, every night I said, "I love you," before going to bed, even if she didn't reply. I told myself maybe she needed to hear it, even if she couldn't say it back. Maybe love was still there, sleeping beneath the silence. Or maybe it had already left, and we were just repeating rituals to avoid mourning. The bed was too big, the room too quiet, and the distance between us, it wasn't measured in steps. It was measured in unspoken words and nights we didn't touch. Winter came, and we didn't even notice, because the cold had already moved inside. Our fifth winter didn't feel like a season. It felt like a room, one we both lived in, but no longer decorated. The calendar said December, but time had stopped meaning anything. Every day blurred into another. The sunlight came and went, and we barely moved with it. We were still married, still legally bound, but emotionally, we were only roommates in the ruins of a love we once called home. She stopped painting completely. The easel stood in the corner like a forgotten monument, draped in dust and silence. I used to hear her brush strokes in the middle of the night. Now, there was only stillness, the kind that wrapped around your chest and whispered, "It's over," even if no one said it out loud. Raina had become a ghost with a heartbeat. She moved through the apartment with grace, but no presence. Her eyes no longer searched for mine. Her hands no longer reached. She didn't cry. I think she had already cried in ways I couldn't see. And me, I became a man who stopped looking for reasons. I stopped bringing flowers, stopped making her favorite tea. I no longer asked if she was okay, because I already knew the answer. We still had dinner together sometimes, sitting at opposite ends of the table, chewing slowly like strangers in a waiting room. Once, the fork slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. We both flinched, surprised by the sound. It was the loudest thing that had happened in weeks. The apartment grew smaller, not physically, but in feeling. Every room echoed. Every step felt like walking through someone else's life. I think we were both grieving, but in different languages. Mine was guilt. Hers was quiet acceptance. We had visitors sometimes, friends who still thought we were cute. We smiled for them, posed for pictures, said, "We're doing well." And maybe we were, at pretending, at surviving, but not at loving. I once found her sitting on the bathroom floor, fully dressed, holding her phone, but not looking at it. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did, and chose not to speak. I wanted to kneel beside her, to ask, "Are we okay?" but I already knew the answer, so I walked away. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It just lingers, like fog, like a film over your eyes, like winter. And yet, despite everything, we didn't leave. Not yet. We stayed. Maybe out of fear, maybe out of habit, maybe because there was still a small, trembling part of us that remembered the sound of two umbrellas brushing in the rain. On our 5th anniversary, we didn't go out. We didn't light candles or play our playlist. She stayed in the bedroom. I stayed on the balcony. It snowed that night. I watched it fall for hours, feeling each flake like a memory I couldn't catch. When I came back inside, she was asleep, or pretending to be. Her breathing was soft, steady, distant. I stood there for a long time, wanting to say something, anything. But all I managed was a whisper. I miss you. She didn't move. Maybe she heard me. Maybe that was the last moment I ever spoke to the version of her I loved. Our 5th winter came and went without ceremony. No big fights, no goodbyes, just two people slowly learning how to live without each other, while still sharing the same bed. And in that silence, deeper than any wound, the decision was quietly being made. That love, when forgotten long enough, begins to let go, even if you don't. Some endings don't echo. They just close, like a book you finish quietly with tears on the last page. It wasn't a dramatic day. No suitcases in the hallway, no slammed doors, no shouting. It was morning. The light was soft, the kind that slips gently through half-closed curtains, warming the edges of everything it touches, even sadness. Raina was sitting at the table, hands wrapped around her mug. She had made 2 cups of coffee, even though we hadn't shared one in weeks. Mine was waiting for me, steam curling upward like a fragile bridge. I sat down across from her, like I had 100 mornings before. The silence between us didn't feel heavy this time. It felt ready. She looked at me, and for the first time in months, she really looked. Not through me, not past me, at me. "I think we both know," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We've been gone for a long time." I nodded. There was no need to ask what she meant. I knew. We both did. We had stayed too long inside a love that had gently expired. "I don't blame you," I said. "I never will." "I don't blame you either," she replied. And that was it. No list of failures, no accusations. Just two people mourning the softest death, the kind where no one is wrong, and yet everything is lost. We talked for a while, about logistics, about paperwork, about who would take the couch, the cat, the books we collected together. But underneath it all, we were saying goodbye to something more sacred, the version of each other that once felt like home. I watched her pack her things a few days later, quietly, tenderly, like she was leaving a museum. Each item a memory, each fold a farewell. She left behind a few things, a sweater, a half-used candle, our playlist, still saved on the kitchen speaker. When she walked out that final morning, she paused at the door, looked back, and smiled. Not a happy smile, not a sad one either. Just soft, tired, honest. "Thank you," she said. And I understood. "Thank you for loving me, even if only for a while. Thank you for trying. Thank you for letting go when it was time." She left. I didn't cry, not right away. I sat in the living room for hours, staring at the quiet. And when the silence finally spoke, I broke. Not because I was angry, but because loving her had been the most beautiful ache of my life. The apartment echoed differently now. Her absence wasn't loud, it was hollow, like the space inside a seashell. Beautiful, but lonely. In the weeks that followed, I found her everywhere. In tea stains on the counter, in half-read books, in the blue thread on a forgotten scarf. I played our playlist once, just once. I listened to each note like a heartbeat I couldn't hoe.